Hey guys, what's happening? So I just want to say real quick, I'm happy some of you guys are checking out these Pokemon reviews, as I'm a Poke fan too, and I did really want to talk about these figures for quite some time. With that said, this time we're going to take a look at the OG legendary Pokemon himself that lurked back in Cerulean Cave behind that creepy old dude. So first up, I just want to mention real quick how cool the holographic silhouette on the box is. Alright, so I just want to bring it back by saying, wow man, like this is one of those figures you see a picture of on Google somewhere, and you finally get it in hand, and it looks and feels even better in hand. Now speaking of in hand, this figure is actually a little bit lighter than I thought it would be, which kind of turns out to work against it, and you'll see why in a little bit. But yo, if you were ever looking for the definitive Mewtwo figure, I'd say this is it, ladies and gents. In terms of its likeness to the character, I'd give this figure a solid 10 out of 10. Now, if you haven't already noticed, mine has a couple of dings on the head, which I'm pretty cheesed about because it just happened when I had this thing in storage, and the plastic that was actually covering it crushed it a little bit too hard and resulted in these things here, which is just an example and goes to show you how careful you have to be with these figures sometimes. Now while we're here, let's take a look at the head. I think this thing looks incredibly accurate. Now of course, artwork and game sprites of Mewtwo has changed, varied over the years, but I think it's pretty safe to say, when you look at this head, you know who you're dealing with. Now on top of this, I'm pleased to say that the figure presents some shading and is not just limited to the head either. And one thing in particular I think came out really well is his ear sculpt. Seriously, what are these things? But yeah, I mean in terms of where they actually start on the skull of Mewtwo, and they're seamless, man, and I love that. They did a really incredible job with that, especially for something where there's no actual real-life anatomical reference, as far as we know. Alright, so next I'd like to draw your attention to his eyes and the accompanying eyebrow ridges. He could definitely give Super Saiyan 3 Goku a run for his money, eh? I really like the shades of purple they chose for his iris, as it's almost identical to that of his tail. And they've even had that little reflective white part in there that you don't typically see with Dragon Ball Z Figuarts. Now moving on down, we have his torso and arms, and the breastbone actually features some more of that shading I was talking about. Not the greatest amount, but it's still there. And I really like this sort of minimalistic, sculpted, bony look going on. Really does the character justice in figure form. And for those of you who know how much of a fan I am of Final Form Cooler, I feel like this is a scaled down version of what his chest plate might look like. Now Mewtwo's arms came out super well too. At first glance, you might take a look at the fingers and say, you know what, these things are pretty big and bulbous, but no, that's exactly how they should be looking. Now for another portion of the figure I really like, the lower half and the tail. Now while there is no shading down here, I don't think there really needs to be, as the contrast between the pale purple and the sort of pale purple grape rosish color is immaculate, and the way the belly transitions into the tail like that is just some straight up Pokemon mastery. Now when we flip the figure around, it's kinda like the opposite of smoothness, as we see what essentially makes the figure tick, as we have all the segments and joints making up Mewtwo entirely visible for the most part. And I mean, it's most noticeable with the tail. Now last time I did a close-up of Charizard's tail, and YouTube hit me up saying that this video might be inappropriate, so I'm gonna take another risk here and dive in again for y'all. Now despite the fact that Charizard's tail is probably one of the most awesome tails in the Pokeverse due to it literally being on fire, I have to say in figure form, Mewtwo has the better tail. Yes, there are a whole bunch more visible lines on it, but hey, there's a purpose behind it. Now as I was alluding to earlier on, the tail does present some issues with it concerning its weight, as it pretty much outweighs the rest of the figure. This makes it pretty difficult to get Mewtwo to stand up using his own 2 feet if the tail is off the ground, and let's be real, most likely it is going to be because Mewtwo just looks badass in those poses. So if you're looking to pose him like that, you're probably going to end up using the stand, which is fine because they include one. Now as for his size, we all know by now Bandai never truly hit the mark with scaling, and these D-Arts Pokemon are no exception. But according to the Pokedex, Mewtwo stands about 6'7", and I've got Charizard here for comparison, and if you missed the review, you can check that out here. Now Charizard Pokedex entry says he stands about 5'7", a whole foot shorter than Mewtwo. And I mean, just off first glance here, I know I have Charizard's neck slightly bent. It could work, but I mean subjectively, if I was to imagine for myself what the heights and weights of different Pokemon would be, I'd say this is a pretty good representation of these two. And just for good measure, here he is next to his brother from another dimension that he never mentions, Frieza. Alright, so when it comes to articulation, we actually have a good amount to talk about. With Mewtwo's head, his best movement here is the side-to-side motion. He does have a little bit of an ability to look down, and in terms of looking up, Mewtwo is a pessimist because it's very limited. Now, actually, one of the coolest parts of his head articulation is what causes this limited motion, and that's this head tube here. I think it's pretty cool how when you make Mewtwo look down, this is kind of an organic motion and makes it look like it's truly a part of Mewtwo's body rather than just a stiff piece of plastic. With Mewtwo's torso, you do get a full 360 rotation here, and his arms aren't anything special either, typical Figuarts arms. Now his hands though are where it kind of gets cool again, in the fact that some of the fingers actually have a little bit of articulation to them, and for the little articulation that they have, you know, it's nothing spectacular, but it is pretty cool to see. Now his legs are pretty good in terms of articulation. They can actually swivel all the way around 360 so long as you move the arm out of the way. So those of you who are looking to expend your high jump kick TM, you two can definitely learn it. Now continuing our way down the leg, his calves do have a full 360 rotation as well as the ability to extend and flex somewhat. And lastly, with regard to his toes, they have a full 360 swivel on them as well. Alright, so the fun part, the tail. So just a word to the wise, the tail is attached by a ball joint underneath his last segment. So if you're going to handle it, do so very carefully or else the whole thing will snap off. Now unlike Charizard, virtually every segment of Mewtwo's tail is articulated and you can pretty much pose it however you want. I mean, it's almost as good as having some bendy wire in there. And it's probably even better in terms of longevity than bendy wire. And one huge bonus with this figure is that the tip does not fall off. I'd be a little concerned if that's what you said. So now in terms of accessories, we don't see too much, but we still get a couple things. And as with all other DArts Pokemon figures, we get the huge Pokeball base stand here. Now we also get this interchangeable hand, and you know, the only difference on this hand with the others is it's a little bit more articulated at the fingers, and it has this peg. Now, what's that for? It's for the effect part. Now, if I didn't already know what this was supposed to be, I would have guessed maybe this is supposed to be like a Psyshock or something, just because it looks a little bit more electrical than ghost-like. But it's actually a Shadow Ball, believe it or not. Now, to me, I would have went a bit more spherical on this attack, but hey, this is what we got. Now, on the back of the box, it's shown to be posed this way, which to me isn't really the greatest. I mean, if you're going for a Statue of Liberty Spirit Bomb look, then sure, why not? But I think it should have been posed a bit more like this. To me, this is a Shadow Ball. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he even charges it this way in Smash Bros, no? For the effect part itself, it's decent. I mean, at least we've got some variation in the colors going on, shades of blue and purple, whatnot, getting darker towards the center, and finally, you know, becoming fully translucent in the middle there. Again, I would have gone a different route for how it looks, as if I didn't know better, I would have guessed this was like a dried up Starmie or an eyeball tripping out or something. All in all, guys, I absolutely love this figure. It's one of the figures I actually scooped up from my eBay days, and I feel like the posing possibilities for this figure are almost endless. And I really like how you can go from a menacing pose to a more pondering existence pose. Hey, throw in a helmet and you've got a very nice Pokemon the first movie throwback. I still remember watching that in the theater. So guys, do you have this figure? Do you guys think you'll ever get this figure? Again, I'd wish they'd continue this line with more Pokemon. The resurgence in popularity with Pokemon Go was probably the time to do it, but like I said, we can only hope. Thanks for checking this one out, guys, and you know what I always say, may the best of your todays be the worst of your tomorrows.